Hey Polrinos! Today we're going to be talking about the Spanish Inquisition and the history of the Spanish Inquisition. It's an area of history I've been interested in for a long time and I've been meaning to make this video for basically ever. Anyway, our story begins in the Iberian Peninsula. Now the Iberian Peninsula we know today probably looks vaguely like that. That's Spain, that's Portugal. In the time period we're talking about, Spain isn't really a thing. It's not a country yet. Instead, this bit in the top corner is Aragon, this bit along the bottom here is Granada, this tiny little bit at the top is Navarre, and the rest of it is Castile, which is by far the biggest kingdom at the time, which for some reason I've not written down. Anyway, our story begins in 1232 in Aragon, this little place in the top corner, when they're permitted an inquisition by the Pope. This was the first sort of inquisition in Spain, but will not be the one you've heard about. It's not as famous, not as much happened. In 1391, these things called pogroms happen. These affect the Jewish communities within both Aragon and Castile. It's almost like rioting. Jewish property is destroyed, Jewish books are burned, all Hebrew books start being burned, and essentially it just leads to forced conversions. So all the Jewish people are forced to become Christians. This creates a divide, so we have our old Christians on one side, who were Christian to begin with, and then on the other side we've got the new Christians, who were forced to become Christians really, and haven't really been taught much about Christianity. People aren't as big a fan of those. This comes quite heavily to light in 1449, when there is rioting in the city of Toledo. People start, smashing things with hammers. There's no evidence whatsoever as to which people were rioting. It could have been anyone from any religious background. But, as we scapegoat these days, they scapegoated then, and everyone was like, oh, it's probably the Jews. And everyone's like, yeah, it's definitely the Jews. It sounds like something they'd do. Libraries then stopped allowing Hebrew books to be kept, which obviously prevents a lot of the Jewish community being able to access their heritage. So as you can see, anti-Semitic feeling was rising before the Inquisition that we'd speak about was really even a thing. Anyway, in 1461, some monks start being like, hey guys, the Inquisition was a great idea, wasn't it? Why are we still doing that? And everyone kind of agrees and is like, yeah, the Inquisition was a good idea. What happened to those days? Why aren't the monarchy bringing it back? Let's go tell the monarchy to bring it back. What a brilliant idea, let's bring back the Inquisition. Now, the monarch at the time is King Enrique, or Henry, depending on if you're reading an English book or not. He wasn't a very strong king. He'd already, basically lost his throne to his brother at one point in an event called the Farce of Aula, if you want to look it up. So he didn't really bother creating, an inquisition. So, the old Christians had caused the pogroms which made Jews become Christians. Now these people weren't just referred to as Christians or even just as new Christians, they were referred to as conversos. I'm going to use that word a lot probably throughout this story because I'm focusing on the converso side of the Inquisition. In 1468, the Archbishop of Toledo realises that people are kind of not being very nice to these conversos. He is not really okay with that. Essentially they're being excluded from their guilds, so they have no support in any business, which is marvellous for them, obviously. This guy is a very old Christian, so you'd really expect him to be listened to when he turns around and goes, hey lads, maybe don't exclude them from guilds, that might be a good idea. So naturally, no one listens. Around this time we could reach a very exciting point, the battle for the throne with girls, which in this time period is very exciting because to not have a male monarch in the 1400s is incredible. The argument is really between Joanna and Isabella. Now you're probably wondering who on earth they are and why they matter. Joanna is Enrique's daughter. Well, apparently she's Enrique's daughter. It's very strongly believed that Enrique was not a heterosexual. In fact, most people believed he was gay, and consequently they thought Joanna was not his son, but someone else's. And this worked out perfectly for Isabella, who definitely agreed with that. She was Enrique's sister, and after Joanna would be the next heir to the throne. So Joanna being illegitimate was perfect for her. So, there's a little side note here. This was only happening in Castile. The rest of Spain didn't give a flying fuck. Had nothing to do with them, so you're probably wondering why it's called the Spanish Inquisition if we're focusing on Castile. Well, here's when it all starts to kick off, lads. There's this guy called Ferdinand. Bit of a lad, you know, he's a prince. He's the future king of Aragon, which, if you'll remember, is over here. So if he gets with the future queen, that means that this much of Spain is squared away for them. And he kind of likes Isabella. There is a slight problem with him and Izzy getting together. They're cousins. And the Catholic Church isn't 100% A-okay with incest, although, you know, they can make exceptions if they, you know, ask the Pope very nicely. On the 18th of May 1469, a letter arrives that's apparently from the Pope. I mean, why would they lie about that? Like, there's nothing to gain, really, right? So he was like, it's fine, love Popey, enjoy the marriage, it'll be great. In hindsight, it was almost definitely forged. But, you know, they didn't seem to care, because they got married in 1469 anyway. So, hope the Pope doesn't mind. Anyway, that Pope died quite soon after, and in 1471, their best pal, the new Pope, sent them a letter saying, no, actually, I am fine with this. You don't need to listen to the forgery. An actual Pope has told you, I'm fine with you being married, even though, like, you got married 2 years ago without permission anyway. But I'm sure, you know, God won't care. Around this time, the city of Cordoba, which is down here, just in the south part of Castile, decides that they're not going to have any conversos in their city anymore. In 1474, Isabella, remember that chick? Yeah, well, she's queen now. That's a slightly sideways drawing of the Iberian Peninsula, but here's where Seville is, just about. And she is off to Seville to meet everyone. Very exciting times, I'm sure you'll agree. In Seville, there's this guy, he's called Hojeda. He's kind of a massive dick. Anyway, forget about him. How important could he possibly be? He's just a random massive dick in, like, a city that she's visiting. So he goes to the Queen and he's like, so, those conversos, they're Judaizing. Judaizing is to follow Jewish customs or Jewish ritual that may be religious or may not be religious. And apparently that's what these conversos are up to. So basically they were allowed to be Jewish, even though Christians made them not be Jewish in 1391 in the pogroms, but, you know, they're allowed to be Jewish. But they can't be a new Christian and still practice Judaism. Even though, you know, no one's actually taught them how to be a Christian, and it's quite difficult to distinguish what is Jewish ritual in terms of the religion and just in terms of tradition and what their family's always done, but they should have worked it out. It's their fault, defo. (1478) on my now slanted screen, because this is around the time my tripod broke, Isabella was off. She'd had her nice time in Seville and she was off. Bye bye, guys. And then Hojeda ran after her, screaming, wait, wait. So she turned around and was like, what the fuck is it, Hojeda? I'm leaving. He claimed he had proof that these people were Judaizing. That's quite bad. Isabella really shouldn't be letting people Judaize, it's a bit naughty. And then, on the 27th of September 1485, they appointed 3 new inquisitors. Very exciting, I'm sure you'll agree. First inquisitors in years. And then, in 1481, there's this lass called Susanna de Suzanne. She's married to this arsehole. He's an old Christian, she's a new Christian. Her dad, he's called Diego de Suzanne, is hanging out with his pals, and they're like, we don't like the sound of this Inquisition lark, it sounds a bit dangerous for us, maybe we should, protest it, or find a way to stop the Inquisition. Susanna's a bit concerned about him and just casually mentions it to her husband. Big mistake. In February, her dad and all his friends are burned. She is so overcome with grief that she joins a nunnery and probably died of the horror that she'd inflicted that on her parents. In 1482, the Pope got wind that people weren't a big fan of the new Inquisition, sent a letter saying that they weren't doing anything by zeal of faith, but by lust for profit. Essentially, they were burning people to take their money. And then Ferdinand sent a lovely reply basically saying, fuck you, you're a fake Christian, you're clearly supporting these Judaizers. The Pope kinda couldn't have that rumour going about, so he replied with, okay, never mind, it's fine, you do what you want, lads. By 1482, 7 inquisitors were appointed. They still weren't doing all that much, to be honest, but they'd started going after people, I suppose. In 1483, shit starts getting serious. The government started a new council within their newly built government, really, called the Council of the Inquisition. This council was built specifically to work towards the Inquisition and to do absolutely nothing else. It was becoming a really important, really official part of Spain. In 1483, Hojeda had died of the plague, so they accounted this new guy, Torquemada, as the Grand Inquisitor, the biggest Inquisitor, the Inquisitor in charge of all the Inquisition and the Inquisitors. Very exciting times, I'm sure you'll agree. In 1485, this guy is praying. His name is Pedro Albuez. He's praying outside of Saragossa Cathedral. As you can tell, that triangle is definitely a cathedral. I'm so good at drawing. He's praying, and then, what's this? There's a guy behind him with a knife? Oh no, what could he possibly do? He kills Pedro Albuez. Pedro Albuez was working on the Inquisition. So really, he should have watched his back a bit better, shouldn't he? Of course, stabbing someone outside a cathedral is a horrific thing. And this was the turning point at which Aragon said, hey, maybe we should get an Inquisition, it's clearly dangerous out there. Clearly these Judaizers are going to kill us all. In 1488, only 7 people were burned by the Inquisition. In 1489, only 3 people were burned by the Inquisition. It appeared to be slowing down. It wasn't that big a deal anymore. People kind of thought it was going to die out like the last Inquisition. In 1490, in LaGuardia, it all kicked off. The LaGuardia trial started because allegedly there was a child called the Holy Child of LaGuardia who was crucified by a bunch of Jews. There was no body and no evidence, and most people now think that the child never even existed. He's often referred to as a non-existent Christian child martyr. In 1492, it was a big year. Well, it was a big year for Ferdinand and Isabella, at least. First things first, Columbus found the New World, but Portugal wished they'd got the paws on that one. Meanwhile, remember this place at the bottom here? Granada. Granada is largely run by Moorish people. Now, depending on which book you read, some people will say that is just Muslims, some people will say that is Muslims who have been forced to convert to Christianity, and like with conversos, don't quite know what's going on. Could be either. For the sake of this, we'll assume it's both. When they expelled all the Muslims from Granada, this was after a very long campaign in which 100,000 Moors were dead, 400,000 of them eventually surrendered. Of that, half of them emigrated, so Granada lost a huge amount of its population. Also, Isabella and Ferdinand had basically promised when they came to power that they wouldn't try and take Granada away from them because they were paying taxes to them, so that worked out well for everyone, didn't it? And then they also kicked all the Jews out of... Not long later, Isabella dies, tragedy. So Charles takes over as soon as he turns 18. Charles is not actually Spanish. He's been raised up in the Netherlands and the Low Countries. In 1520, Aragonese Muslims are forcibly converted. Does this sound familiar? It should sound familiar. It's almost exactly the same as what happened after the Pilgrims. In 1521, shit's going down in Germany. This is Martin Luther. Martin Luther is unhappy with the church, so he writes down 95 fuck yous to them and pins them on a church door. This starts a fucking revolution. Now you're probably wondering why Spain care about Germany. Well, first of all, the Pope's banned the 95 Theses, and they're really Catholic, but also Charles is kind of Holy Roman Emperor and is running Germany for the most part. In 1526 there was supposedly no Islam in Spain. Now this sounds ridiculous. Islam would have existed just in underground groups, and maybe even not that underground, but Spain declared that Islam was gone from its country. In 1531 we get a story about a lady called Francisca Hernandez. She is an Alumbrado. These people were deemed to be enlightened people. They were deeply spiritual. However, this was deemed not Christian enough, or certainly not Catholic enough in the light of the Reformation that's happening throughout the rest of Europe. Then we've got this guy Vives who's boxing. Wait, no, he's running. Oh, that doesn't look like running, Robin. What are you doing? Sort it out. That's better. Just have his arms out. I'm sure they'll work it out. Vives is fleeing the country. In 1524 his father was burned for heresy, and then he went to this little uni and started writing things. And that's great until it gets published and everyone decides you're a heretic and they're going to burn you. He writes a letter about how there's fear in Spain. Spain is no longer safe for the learned. If you study theology, you can't discuss what you've learnt because that is heresy. He dies in 1540. But manages to dodge being burnt. So, what's happening in Spain now? Have they actually got anything other than Catholics left? So, let's take a look at the list. So, Jews, they're gone from 1492. Muslims, they're gone from 1526. Conversos, supposedly wiped out by the Inquisition. Other Christians, supposedly wiped out by this Inquisition. So surely Spain now is super Catholic. Or maybe not. So, in 1550 in Toledo, you guys remember Toledo, only 37% of people could recite the three main prayers. So maybe they weren't actually that Catholic, they were just good at pretending to be Catholic, which I think we can all relate to. In 1559, the Index of Prohibited Texts is brought in. This was basically stolen from the Netherlands and was a massive fuck-off list of books that you weren't allowed to have in the country. If you had them, it was punishable by death. This stopped a lot of information reaching the country and was just detrimental to the country as a whole. So what can you do in Spain these days? Books? Nah, they're banned. Learning? So this was basically banned. There was this university called the University of Alcala. It was one of supposedly the most enlightening theological study places in the entire world, and they burnt a load of people from it because they were Alumbrados, and yeah. And then travelling was banned in 1559. If you were studying abroad, you had to come home or you weren't going to be allowed back into the country. Lots of fun Spain in the 1500s. By 1565, only 40% of people could recite the Ten Commandments. By this point, the Inquisition should have really rooted out anyone who wasn't an excellent Catholic. So really, surely it was just racist and anti-Semitic. But more importantly than that, here's the key thing about the Inquisition. Fundamentally, it didn't work. It failed.